welcome everybody to what is episode 3 of Portal's podcast, No Shelf Control. I'm very pleased to be welcomed by Juliana, who is a long-term colleague and now friend of mine. So Juliana, do you want to tell the audience a little bit more about yourself and your role?
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me here today. So I had a bit of an unusual career path. I'm originally from Brazil. I used to be a lawyer in Brazil, but I didn't like working as a lawyer. It's too much bureaucracy and paperwork. I've always been, someone who likes to learn different things. And, I think law, you get so specialized and you end up repeating the same topic. So I decided to change completely. I came to Europe to do a master in management in the Netherlands. And then I joined AB InBev's graduate scheme in France. So for people who don't know, AB InBev is the biggest beer company in the world, owns huge brands such as Corona, Budweiser, and Stella Artois. So I worked for them 2.5 years in France in different sales roles. Then I moved to the UK where I work in trade marketing, doing all the strategy and execution of our shopper marketing in the UK in wholesale and convenience. Then I moved on to the wonderful world of e-commerce during the pandemic, leading our Amazon account in the peak of e-commerce boom in 2020, which, was challenging, but a very exciting times. So I learned a lot in that experience. Then I moved on to head e-commerce marketing for Europe, so leading the team that was responsible for doing all the brand activation across all our retail partners in different European markets. And then in my last role, I led Corona digital strategy for Europe, really building the brand's digital capabilities, trying to get better with data, full funnel marketing, and becoming best in class on, this channel that is becoming more and more and more important every day.
Absolutely. It's where consumers are spending every single moment of their life.
Yeah.
All you have to do is get on the tube and see everybody's head down on their mobile phones. I mean, that's incredible, Juliana. You've been with the company, best part of a decade. You must have seen huge changes in the way the company has gone about media planning, execution, and then obviously more recently, the introduction of retailers and what that means for media data. So I'm excited to really unpack that.
So after 9 years with AB InBev, I decided to leave last year to start my own company. So now I own a marketing agency where I help startups with their marketing strategy, their messaging, their value proposition, as well as outreach and lead generation. I'm also doing some consultancy on the side, and I'm currently doing a fractional business director role for Publicis, which is a huge media company leading a retail media strategy for L'Oreal.
Well, so you've definitely got the CV to be able to talk to me today about the changing complex ecosystem of digital and how CPGs are interacting with it. So before we get serious, I always like to kick things off with something a little bit, let's say, more lighthearted. So if you had to describe the state of digital marketing in 2025 in one sentence, what would it be and why?
Excitingly complex. I think, if I were to describe with an analogy, I love jewelry.
Yeah.
My husband, says I'm a magpie, but when I, traveling, I put all my jewelry in a box and they all get a bit tangled. So I think it's a bit the state, of like digital media, so much data points, there's so much potential, but they're all a bit tangled, I don't know what happens. And then I think, we really need to like unpack all these different data points to make sense of it and like untangle to really make, all these capabilities shine. Like beautiful jewelry after we untangle them. Because there's so much data point, but it's like now we need to see, how do we combine all these different data points to extract value out of it, to understand which data point should be used, which stage of the shopper journey, which stage of the funnel, what is relevant, what is, incremental, etc. So much data out there, but how do we use it? How do you combine data from different sources? Once we, it's not something for this year, but it's a journey that I think every company, media, retailers are on, how to figure it out and structure that. But there's so much potential. I love, I'm so curious about all those different things there is to unpack there.
Absolutely. I can see that you're passionate about the subject, which is why we probably get on so well. So obviously, I completely agree. I think when perhaps you started at AB InBev, digital was used more of an extension of TV, very much an awareness channel. I think we've seen huge amounts of data flow through the industry, and CPGs have to navigate that. What's useful, what's not useful. And then we've got the added complexity of all the retailers that are coming to the play that are bringing different data sets to the table. So definitely a changing market and not so easy to navigate. What I want to know is how, in your experience, do you think CPG brands expectations of digital marketing have evolved, and what are the main major shifts that you've seen in the last few years of working in this space?
Yeah, no, this is very interesting because, if we look back in time at CPG, these are brands with, so many years, 50 plus years, year old brands. So when they started doing marketing, it was pretty much, TV, big commercials, Super Bowl, billboards, and then the strategy is really just to like build their awareness, create memory structures on consumers' heads. So when they go to the supermarkets, to the shop to buy, they think, oh, I saw, that brand. I'm going to pick that brand versus there's one I never heard about. Oh, that advertising told me this one is refreshing. They have this new flavor. Let me try that. So, that was kind of like the marketing strategy for CPGs for many years. But of course, with advent of technology and digital has been growing a lot. So of course, investments are shifting a lot from the traditional channels to digital. Every year, I think brands are shifting more and more into digital. And then that also came with a journey, for brands to learn. So I think initially when they shift from digital, it was pretty much take your TV ad, chop it off, and put it into Facebook, into different seconds. And then they went into, okay, this doesn't work. We need to adapt, what we call fit for format, like what works well on YouTube doesn't work well, like as well on Instagram. Different channels require different creatives. So that was one piece of the journey. And then the second piece of the journey is figuring out more the bottom of the funnel, right? Because, we want to reach as many people, but then we want to retarget them, and then we want to make sure that they convert because, awareness is important, but it's just a piece of the journey because at the end of the day, everyone wants money in the pocket, right?
Yeah. Well,
but I guess the challenge for these brands, that most of them don't have a D2C website, is, once they click to the retailer, brands lose the sight of what is happening. So that is another piece of challenge. And then the retailers came on and they're like, okay, there's opportunity for us. And then came, this boom of retail media that we're seeing on. So I think it's been an interesting journey with so many stages and evolution.
And so someone that sat inside the CPG brand, did you see that conversation change from we're just going to spend money from an awareness point of view and we're going to measure with clicks and impressions and reach, to a shift in the questionings coming perhaps in your internal meetings to be, well, what else are we driving here? What's the value add? And do those questions come a bit more around, well, what's the actual sales uplift? Does measurement come into that conversation a lot more, and has it done in the last few years?
Yeah, for sure. I think measurement has always been like a key topic, like I think even with traditional channels, we had our marketing mixing modeling, like that we estimate. But I guess in digital is slightly different because you can be a bit more agile, right? Because with the measurement models, it's like after you finish the campaign, then you need to like measure the uplift and do these things, and then you get the learning for the next campaign. Versus in digital, you get data pretty much real time, right? So you can be much more agile and test and learn. So it was like, okay, now we have this opportunity. How do we measure in it? And then, of course, in awareness, pretty easy to measure. You can look at your reach, your impressions, your cost per impression, engagement. You can look at your view-through rate, your click-through rate. But then conversion has always been like the big gap, I guess, because then we're missing that, when consumers get to the retailer websites, are they bouncing, are they converting, are they buying your product, are they buying the competitors' products? But even I would go even above, an awareness on click. You want people to see your brand, but I would also be interested to see, okay, it's not the primary KPI, is not for people to buy, but like I would be interested to see is like, okay, once they go to the website, what are they seeing, how they're browsing, how much time are they spending with my brand? Because every minute spent with the brand is building that affinity, the connections for them to come and purchase, even if in the future.
I understand. You're talking my language now. It's a topic that I know very well, and it's something that I also believe is a big challenge for CPG brands. So there's no doubt that sort of retail media is booming. I think we've identified that there is a gap between awareness, brand-driven media, and conversion. And then the other side of the fence is the ability to run media with the retailers themselves, both on and off site. Definitely has its part to play in the marketing mix for a CPG brand. But what excites you most about that trend? And where do you see the biggest opportunities, as well as perhaps the gaps? Maybe we've already mentioned a few, but it'd be great if you could touch on that for a little bit from your experience.
Yeah, I think it's amazing, there's a rise in retail media because, ultimately brands and retailers want to work together to drive sales, right? They both have the same interest at heart. And then the retailers have had all like this data, gold mine that before was being underutilized. And now, it's an amazing pot for brands and retailers to explore. So there's so much opportunities, in terms of audience, the retailers have all these data from loyalty shoppers, so you can be much more target to, present your media to people who are more likely to convert, and therefore not having all the wasted impressions that you normally have, on traditional media channels. You put a TV advert, you cannot choose who is watching it. Versus with media, you can, serve it to the people who have been browsing the category, have been browsing your brand, having browsing competitor brands, making not only a better experience for the consumer, because I don't want to be served ads of things that I don't care about. So it's better consumer experience. It's even from I think, an ecological point of view, we don't talk much about it, but it's like every wasted impression is so much processing power and energy, So we're like, if we think, we serving this, hundreds of thousands of impressions for like 1% to click or whatever, it's like a lot of ways. So I think if you can be more targeted, if there's retailer medias with audience is super exciting. And then closing the loop, as I said, the gap on the conversion. So the retailers, of course, they own the final point of purchase. So they can say, okay, we serve this, people saw it that many times, and then they convert on that time. So bringing, that full funnel attribution model is very exciting. On the challenging side is, of course, every retailer have their own capabilities. They have their own measuring models. They have different attribution windows. They have different, ways to measure. They're measuring on brand, on product level. Is it 7 days? Is it 14 days, etc.? Making a bit of a minefield for brands to compare apples to apples, right? So not all ROAS are created equally. So I think that's one piece of the puzzle, that brands need to untangle is, how do you normalize all these different ROAS to make sure, you know where to invest. Not only in retailers, but I think, on Facebook and Google, like how if you're running a Meta campaign for a retailer versus a Meta campaign directly with Meta, like the additional cost for running for the retailer, is it worth it? How do you compare? And then the incrementality piece of it. So that's it's quite a complex but a very interesting subject.
I talk about incrementality with clients on a daily basis, and I think it's not just with me. They're having that conversation. They're having that conversation in the boardroom, at the management level, and with every single brand. So I certainly agree. It's a fragmented industry, and I think from what we're hearing from the CPG side is a big call for conformity and everybody to work within some sort of consistent framework. So, of course, technology can be a real saving grace in that space, and we wouldn't be in media and digital if we weren't going to mention AI. So what emerging technologies do you see playing a role for CPG brands, specifically in media activation?
I'm so excited about AI because there is so much potential. And I know it's very controversial, like people are like love it or hate it. But I think the genie is out of the bottle. We can either use it to our advantage or, I think get left behind.
Yeah.
So, I think there is so much potential, I guess, in the first initial in terms of insights. I think AI, is going to do a much better job than humans in terms of social listening. It's like having a look at everything that consumers are talking about, what is trending, to then pick up on these, piece of insights to make your brand comms more relevant, to make adapt your creatives, to make sure that you're serving things that are in touch with culture. So I guess, that first initial stage. Then the second stage is on the learning process and optimization. Okay, let's test different creatives, and then AI can automatically pick up what is performing better, and then put more budget towards this, and then create more creatives, because AI can create things much more cost effective, just change, a call to action. If it's like, okay, this is working well, can you create 2 more variants based on the one that is working well to really accelerate that flywheel and drive more sales to what is driving the best results. I think they're the key ones.
Absolutely. I think generative AI from a creative standpoint is going to really overturn this industry. And what comes with that, I think, is mass addressability. And I'm really excited to see, perhaps even using our own platform, the uplifts in consumer behavior trends when you do use generative mass addressable creative versus business as usual creative that's built for one audience and one message. So exciting things to come for sure. And what about in terms of measurement? Are you seeing anything that you think is exciting from in terms of attribution point of view? And yeah, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on whether you've seen some cool tech in that space. Not a loaded question.
Of course, Porto is super exciting. That we're talking with you when I was in my previous role, because I thought it was that kind of piece of the puzzle that was missing. As I said, in the bottom of the funnel, once consumers click to retailers, what they're doing, are they purchasing my product or not, as well as top of the funnel, right? Because top of the funnel we can measure awareness and reach. But it will be interesting to also see, after that, retailers are clicking to, brands are clicking to retailer websites. Are they browsing through? Are they like going through my product list? Are they interacting with my reviews? So that all gives like different insights, as well as like competitor benchmark, just having that visibility post-click. I think it's super, super interesting. And also the ability to compare apples to apple, because I think a gap that we have is like, okay, how do we compare Google versus Meta? Like how much budget are we putting in each of them? Which keywords are driving more conversion? Which creatives are driving more conversions? We used to, optimize based on clicks, but we know that clicks is not a good proxy for conversion. So, D2C brands are very good of like optimizing based on conversion, on their cost per acquisition, but unfortunately, brands who don't have a direct-to-consumer websites were left behind on that point. So I think, Porto is in a very exciting technology to close that gap that's been there for years and has been like a massive pain point that many, senior stakeholders and everyone in the digital world are trying to tackle.
So Juliana, we've obviously already covered that you've got a wealth of experience in this space. You've gone all the way from trade marketing to the roles that you're in today, which is leading digital marketing initiatives, strategies across Europe for major CPG holding companies. What's one piece of advice you'd give to CPG marketing leaders who are preparing for the next wave of digital transformation?
Yeah, so I'm actually going to give you 3.
Okay, great.
But I guess the first one is like test and learn is crucial, right? And I think that's the main benefit of digital media is you have the capability of test and learn, having all the data points, adapt very fast. I've always been, a very curious person, and my nickname at school was like question girl, because I was always like, why this, why that? So I love, like setting up tests, and you see all brands who don't test, who don't innovate are left behind. So like exploring different technologies, exploring different solutions, different way of approaching media. Don't do your whole budget, like I like a 80-20 approach, like 80% of your budget, at least, in your bread and butter, things have been tested and proven. and then, reserve some budget to test something new, because you never know if you're going to strike, gold.
Yeah.
And then within that, the second one is just like stop and pause to reflect. I think, everyone is so busy and we get caught up on like doing. Now with Publicis, they have a reflection day, which I think is quite good, to take a step back from, your day to day of the business and think, because speed, I think, is super important. But if you're moving at speed in the wrong direction, you're going to get to the wrong destination. So I think, taking a step back, reflect is my strategy. Going well, what do I need to adjust and recalibrate? It's super important. And it's very easy to just get caught up, especially when you've been to a company for so many years, getting to the day to day. And then the number 3 is just, get out there and meet different startups and different technologies, because sometimes we just get caught in our ways of working, and there's so many things out there that are interesting to explore. Like after I left AB InBev, I went to many startup events. I'm like, why didn't I take the time to do this before? There's so many good technology that that can make our lives so much more efficient, that try different things, get a competitive edge. So I think like taking an introverted day to reflect, but then an extroverted day to go out there, meet different people, hear from different perspectives. I think there is a lot of value that can be achieved by corporate speaking with startups, startups speaking with corporate, because each of them have their own positives and things that they can learn and do better. So I think that interaction can be really rich, and it's something that I learned so much when I stepped out of the corporate and set up my own company.
Yeah, I really like that. As somebody that's always been on the startup side, it can be very difficult to get into some corporates, but I think I remember you and I met in exactly that way. We got introduced in a corporate meeting with startup fashion. So it definitely works, because we've worked together on a few different projects now. So Juliana, I want to turn this to my favorite part of the conversation, which is looking to the future, starting to make some predictions as to, if we continue on the path we're on, where we're going to find ourselves in sort of 2030. So that'll be my next question. So I believe retail media is going to keep booming. How you want to define retail media is up for discussion, whether it's where AB InBev might start to invest some of their more dollars going to retail, or on-site or off-site with the retailer. If retail media keeps going at the rate it's going, what's a wild prediction for how it could look in 2020, 2030? Any thoughts on that?
Oh, retail media. That's an interesting one. I think maybe more like partnerships between, like retail and brands, maybe with different media platforms as well. Live stream is funny, how things like come into full circle, because I think when we're kids, they're like live stream on TV, pick up the phone and call, and now it's booming on TikTok, and it's like, I never thought that, people would go on TikTok and buy, like CPG products, but it does happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that brand, I don't know if you heard, like Perfect Head is like a matcha brand that was invested on by Stevie Butler, and they did like a live stream on TikTok, and it worked really well. They were like in a magazine, and I was like, it's interesting, that these things are coming. Amazon is now doing live streams. So I'll be curious to see how this all gonna play out. Maybe it's going to work, maybe it's not, but it's an interesting one to see. But I think things are going to move into a more consolidated view. I think brands are going to demand a more like consistent clarity and consistency measurement across retailers, so they can better evaluate. I think, another thing, maybe I think retailers are going to leverage more AI for personalization and different promos and rewards. I think that is already happening a little bit. I see, sometimes people in my family get different like promos from some retailers than I do. So they're probably already doing this in terms of like recruitment, lifetime value. So I think, we're going to move into a better clarity in terms of funnel touch points, how many touch points we need to recruit a consumer, and then calculate lifetime value, which is something, that we haven't really cracked on yet, to calculate, okay, there's the main consumer journey, this is kind of my attribution model, there's my lifetime value, there's, in how many months I need to reactivate that customer because they're probably going to disengage. So I think there is loads still to come. I'm curious to see what is going to happen in that in that world.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're going to see a lot more personalization. At what point it becomes creepy, I think, is up for debate. But
yeah, it's true.
So we come to the last bit here, Juliana. I love this section because it's a bit more fun again. And this question is a what-if scenario. So if you were tasked with building the ultimate digital marketing dream team, but your budget allows for you to only hire fictional characters, who's on your team and what roles are they taking?
That's a funny one. I'm not too much into fictional like superhero movies, but I did watch a lot of Disney growing up.
Okay.
So I'm gonna go back old school millennial into my Disney days. So I think number one, I would hire Mulan
Okay.
to be the leader. You know, she led the army to defeat the enemy in China.
Yeah.
So she is really, you know, like strategic as well. She was a woman. She's not going to win on force. So she made like some strategies to bring them to the palace and defeat the whole army. So I think, you know, every team needs a leader to set a direction and be strategic. And also, you know, she makes things happen. She was a woman, but she managed to do all the tasks. So, you know, every team needs someone who gets things done.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then number two would be Ariel, like the little mermaid.
Yeah.
She is very curious. You know, she always had this curiosity about going to the new world, what this object does, or the human object. So I think curiosity and that growth mindset of learning different things, testing and learning. She was like brushing her hair with a fork, you know, and it's like, oh, that's not the right way. Let's test another way.
Okay.
So she will be my test and learn expert, you know, setting up all the different experiments. Then I would have probably Belle as my data analyst. She loves, you know, like reading. So I think she'll be very good at like looking at all the data, analyzing what's working well, what's not working well. And she also challenging the beast, you know, she was not afraid to tell him when things were not going well.
Yeah.
I like team members who, you know, are challenging and say, okay, this is not good. Can we do this different? You know, I think, you know, you need to be constantly challenging to improve.
Nice.
So yeah,
I like that. I'd like to be introduced to that team, actually. I think we could do some good work together. Okay, that's a great answer. Juliana, I just want to thank you very much for taking the time to join me on today's episode of No Shelf Control. And I hope to see you again soon, and I'm sure we'll work together closely in the future.
No, thank you for having me here. It was a pleasure to talk with you as always. And yeah, excited to watch how this retail media space and see Portal and other different campaigns. I'm curious to learn other results.
Appreciate it. And we'll see you in the next one.
Bye.